I think would also be important for people that maybe I haven't met or discussed with. My name is Ronald. I'm part of the EMEA talent acquisition team here at Splunk. And today we have Tony Reed, who will deep dive into more advanced commands and show us really the true power of the Splunk platform. Tony, you've been in the industry for what is it? Is it 20 years now since you've joined the industry?
Yeah. At least that. I don't really want to think about it, but yeah.
I'm sure you'll have some great stories or things to share with us, which is extremely exciting. So without further ado, I'll leave the floor to you, Tony.
Thank you.
And
thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, good morning. Welcome everybody. Fantastic. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. And yeah, I mean, I'll start with, yes, I've been an SE, a sales engineer, systems engineer. We kind of chop and change a bit. So a sort of a technical salesperson for probably 30 years, if I actually think about it. I've worked at, way back when I left, education, I went and worked at Microsoft, and I worked at Oracle, and I've worked at SAP. And pretty much all of that time, I spent a bit of time as a trainer, a technical trainer when I very first started. Spent a bit of time as a developer. Quickly realized that there were people an awful lot better at me at writing code and possibly not so comfortable as I was at standing up in front of people and talking to people. So quickly sort of dodged out of that deep sort of technical development world. But I've always had that sort of aptitude. Worked at Microsoft as sort of the, I mean, this is way back when, Microsoft were just releasing Windows, would you believe, and just releasing Office, and worked there as the sort of literally going out talking to people about what a spreadsheet was and what this amazing thing called a spreadsheet and a word processor was. So been doing this a while. And I think, I guess what that tells you is being an SE is the best job in the industry, in the technical industry. I've been a consultant, I've been a salesperson, I've been a trainer. I've enjoyed different aspects of different ones of all of those. But for 30 odd years, I've kind of thought, what, an SE is it's best of all of that. Yeah, so kind of I just can't recommend it enough. It's every day is different. You get to really challenge yourself understanding the technology. But then you get the kind of excitement of trying to go out there and convincing other people of its benefits, and you're not the salesperson, so you're not sort of, you're not up all night worrying about your sales forecast and your sales target and are you going to hit your number this quarter? We kind of are, we're very much, involved in that process. But you get to keep an eye on the tech, and you get to understand what the technology is about. But then, as I say, every day is kind of different because you're talking to different customers each day and you're trying to understand what they want to do, and it's trying to get them to talk to you more than ramming your message down their throats. Trying to get them to talk to you about what they're trying to do, and then aligning Splunk's capability in vast breadth now that we have as a capability, trying to align it and light it up for them and get them excited and whet their appetite so that they want to become Splunk customers. And when they are Splunk customers, you then get to maintain a relationship with them and make sure they're really capitalizing upon the vast breadth of capability. Yeah, so that's why I'm an SE. And then to sort of fold that conversation into this a little bit of advanced sort of a glimpse of some of the more advanced capabilities of Splunk. I'll talk to you about this particular use case or particular application of Splunk right now. But before we go on to that, any questions about my background and about the SE role and about why I still love it after all that time? If not, I'll move swiftly on to showing you this particular kind of
I may have a question. I may have a question for you, Tony, if that's okay. And we'll wait to see if anyone else may have a question for you. What piece of advice, let's put it this way, if you were able to travel back in time, what piece of advice would you give to Tony Reed at the start of his career?
Nice. Yeah, I tell you one piece of advice I did receive early on in my career, which actually I have heard myself repeat on a few occasions, which is when you're sort of starting your career, almost everybody you meet kind of treat it as a bit of an interview. I mean, obviously not quite as tense and as sort of nervy as an interview is, but if somebody says, let's meet up, let's have a cup of coffee, let's go and kind of put yourself into sort of right, let's shine, let's sparkle, let's be on our let's be our best self, let's go out there and continue to sort of establish your brand as a sort of an individual. So that I think that's and probably throughout your career, why not maintain that sort of enthusiasm and brightness and purpose in every engagement you have with people.
Super interesting.
Yeah, that's
that's great. Only if we could travel back in time. I wish I
was listening to somebody just yesterday talking about using Splunk as doing time travel with Splunk, which is a very advanced use case, that they were getting data from one time period and playing it forward again in another period to sort of to reproduce what occurred then now as a very advanced use case. So
wow,
unless there are any more questions, I'll show you this thing, my trick, one trick Tony. I first saw this trick, this bit of Splunk a few years ago, actually, maybe a couple of years ago. Somebody got up in the room and presented it and said, did you know you can use Splunk for this? And I was explaining it to Ronald. The fancy term for it is cyclical statistical forecasting. And I only mention that because if you want to research this after we've spoken today, you do a search for that, and I'll put it up on a dashboard in just a moment, so you don't have to remember it. That's the fancy term for it. But kind of what it is using, as humans, we kind of are comfortable when things are as they normally are, right? This relates to just about anything. If you're, I said to Ronald, if your heart rate is kind of where it normally is, you're kind of comfortable. If it isn't, you might want to know about it. If your car is using fuel at the same rate as it normally does, then that's good. And if it isn't, and we're quite tuned in, aren't we, to when things sound different or even smell different or whatever. So this technique is using, and what we're typically doing there, I suppose, is normally at this time of the day, it normally does this. So if it suddenly, whatever it is you're interested in, if it's not doing that amount or that volume or that quantity at that time of day, then you're probably going to be tuned into it, or you might want to be notified that your bank account has just disappeared through the floor and it doesn't normally, then you probably want to know about it. So this is what we're going to do here. We're going to use Splunk to sort of use sort of historical data to give us a kind of a benchmark for what it should look like today. If it always looks like this, then let's use that historical data that we've captured into Splunk to give us a baseline or some sort of an upper and lower kind of corridor, like a happy corridor of this is what we expect it to do today. And if it's suddenly a lot higher or a lot lower, then we want to know about it, right? So here is just some data in Splunk. It happens to be sort of network, sort of traffic onto a website. And it's my whole sort of world of really, things come alive in Splunk when you start to sort of analyze it in more depth, right? And Splunk is infinitely capable. It is the most amazing tool I've encountered across that entire career for just, it's a bit like a spreadsheet on steroids with it's got all of the capability of of Excel or any sort of platform for crunching data. And as I say, I've always, worked around spreadsheets, and it's always people who are like the spreadsheet kind of bunnies seem to me to be the ones who've always got the insight, and they become known as, oh, if you want to know what's going on, go and talk to so-and-so, because they've got this amazing spreadsheet that analyzes all of this data and gives you a really good view as to what's going on. Splunk is like that on steroids, multiplied by 10, and it has the benefit of, rather than a spreadsheet being a static a dump of data with a certain end and begin point or begin and end point, Splunk is real time. It's got this constant pipeline of real-time data flowing in from all areas of your business. So here we go. So here, we were looking at that access combined data, this web traffic, and I've just used one of the, you would have come across this on your Splunk for Rookies time chart command. Just tell me how many is there per 5-minute interval. And we can immediately see over this, and I'm looking at a 7-day period here. Let me shrink down this thing. 7 days, we can immediately see this pattern thing that I'm talking about, right? You can see there that, each there's this really obvious kind of recurring pattern. And that's because we're looking at demo data, which literally just plays over and over again, right? But even in the real world, I've used this pattern in all sorts of use cases. And, still to this day, I talk about, one of the highlights, one audience, one of the guys, like a 15-year telco veteran said, you know what, this is the best thing we've done in my 15 years as a telco person. This was looking at telco network broadband traffic and using it to establish a kind of a weekly cadence of what, that traffic should look like. Because apparently on a kind of a, if you look at the 1,000 houses in your network or your local community, the broadband traffic aggregated up will be fairly consistent. It's quiet during the days, during the week, because we're all out at work, and it gets busy in the evenings, particularly busy on a Friday, and it's busy over the weekend. You get this kind of, pattern that plays out. In that case, it was a weekly pattern. Here, we're looking at something that's quite clearly a daily pattern, right? It just so happens that my demo data plays out round about the same. There's, little variances you can just about see. It's not exactly the same, but you can see this daily pattern. And if you see this daily pattern, well, you will see this daily pattern time and time again. Lots of things operate on a daily or maybe a weekly, maybe each day is not exactly the same, but each week is kind of the same. Each Monday is kind of the same as the next Monday and the one after and the one before. So you can start to see, you can visualize that you've got a daily pattern. You would visually know that if suddenly this, rather than being 529, was kind of 1,529, you would see quite clearly something weird happened at that point. And, as IT sort of monitoring or security people or whatever, anything weird, probably, you want to be on top of. So let's move on. So this is why I put it on there, just so that if you're interested, you want to go out and do a bit of a search for this. This is all well kind of this pattern that I'm going to talk about is very well annotated, out there. You can just do a search for cyclical forecasting Splunk, and you'll get these part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 big old blogs written up, not by me, funny enough, but these are the people who founded this sort of pattern all that time ago and wrote it up. So you can now go out and find it, and there are the searches that I'm going to demonstrate for you. There it is, quite clearly written out, and you can use it and perhaps try and build it into what you're doing. So let me show you how you use this. This pattern that this guy is talking about. We're gonna actually use on this data. We can see that it's appropriate because we can visually eyeball this repeating sort of pattern. So we know that if we were to produce or we could use this data to produce an average day, right? We've got each day here is kind of the same, so we could kind of fold that together and produce like an average day. So we would know, at 7:30, we tend to get, 522 there. We had 7:30. We had a few less here, but it was round about the same. We get this pattern. So here we go. Let's look at this in a bit more detail. Here's that same, I'm actually looking at the 3rd of December now, let me reset. I've drilled in on this to this very first day, right back here in the beginning, the 3rd of December, somewhere around about there. So now I'm looking at that same period here. Here we go. Each hour folded in on its, is showing a fairly clear repeat, just using that time chart command. And in terms, as I said, Splunk is just infinitely capable of showing you your data in any way you want to do. If you're a spreadsheet person, think of all the things you can do with data once you've got it into a spreadsheet, how you can, tumble it and create calculations based upon it and sort it and flip it and aggregate it and collapse it and sum it and total it and perform miraculous calculations upon it. Just be rest assured, and I've challenged various audiences with this now repeatedly over the 3 or 4 years since 2 or 3 years, whatever it is, since I first saw this pattern. And I've now stood up in front of probably hundreds of audiences and said, showed them it. And then sort of, this gives you a glimpse into what Splunk can do. And if you bite upon this, it's not for everyone. I recognize this is not this sort of level of tech or level of technology or level of kind of coding is what we're going to do in some ways. It's not for everyone. It's not for all SEs. You don't have to be comfortable with this to be an SE. Some of my SEs, some of my colleague SEs are much more sort of business kind of focused, and that's fine. For me, understanding the tech at this level and being comfortable with queries such as this, let me show you. It's what is it? It's half a dozen lines of tech, which takes that raw data, right? Let me show you what this does. What I'm trying to do here, if I go back to my dashboard, is show each of these hours. I just want to demonstrate nice and clearly to my audience. Here's the first hour over here, right? December the 3rd, the first hour of the day, the first 5 minutes value there was 466. This is the same data that I'm just showing each hour of the day overlaid on one chart. So there's my 00 hour, the color's not particularly clear. There's the 01 hour. You can see they're all, it just emphasizes the point, right? That all of these time cycles, these time periods are very, very similar. They all overlay each other. There's 02, there's the 03 hour, 04. And this is what I mean about Splunk, is this infinitely capable. Let's look at that query, right? To show you how you produce that visualization that we were looking at. And actually what I've done on this visualization is I've got each of the hours, 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, all the way up to 23, obviously. And then I've got the average. I've kind of shown on this chart, I've actually used these numbers, if you like. There's the table below. So there's the 00 hour, the first 5 minutes, the next 5 minutes, the next 5 minutes, the volume of traffic on my site. There's the 01 hour, the 2 o'clock hour, the 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. And then over here, I've got, well, what's the average? Basically add up all of these values, these 24 values across, and then kind of divide by 24. And if you do that, you'll get 464. So the average number of visits to my website in the first 5 minutes of the day, based upon the data from Friday, December the 3rd, is 464. In the next 5 minute window, it's around about the same. It's 466, and then it's 465. And then there's a bit of a, it kind of peaks up a little bit. Each hour has this little bump, this little typical curve. So, and this is the query that does that. And this, as I say, not everybody wants to look at data in this way, but for me, it's been a revelation in my career, even at this relatively advanced stage, shall we say, to be able to be fluent in this language has enabled me to sort of go into any environment, any Splunk environment, and say, let me show you what you can do with Splunk, right? So you start off by looking at that data that we started looking at. What do we then do? We use that time chart command that that we did to just get just to split that up into 5 minute intervals. So there we go. There's my 5 minute interval. There's my table. There's my numbers that populate the visualization. And these numbers, as you can see, is that 476, 466. There's each 5 minutes. Then what I want to do is just now just think of Splunk just like a spreadsheet. I've basically got this spreadsheet with the timestamp and then then the volume over here. So what I'm then going to do is use this eval command to extract from the time the hour element and the minute element. So apply a calculation to this to say, give me the hour element and the minute element for each row in my spreadsheet, if you like. So let's show you what that does. Each command now just sort of, there you go, I've added a column called date hour, which is 00 for this one, but it's 01 for this one because this is 01, and it's 05 because this is 01, 05. Yeah, 5 minutes past 1. All I've done is just like a spreadsheet, added a column, used a calculation based upon another column to populate my new columns. Then what I want to do is sort of tumble the data a little bit. I want to use the chart command next, and I want to say, rather than sort of showing the data in this list form, I want to turn exactly the same data, but because like by a kind of a grid with hours down one side and minutes, hours across the top and minutes down the side, because I can, this is now exactly that same list of data, right? I've got, there's my 476, my 466, 466. But I've then rather than having the next hour sort of, as a list down below, I've just tumbled it and produced a side-by-side, a matrix, whatever you want to call this, a table of data. So now I can just read it in a slightly different way. And actually, when I visualize it now, I can visualize it. And I'm sure if you were in a spreadsheet, you would be able to produce this table, and I produce a chart, and there we go. This table is now showing that, these existing, I've only got the 23 hours here, right? I've only got my existing 23 hours. I haven't calculated the average. So let's go ahead and do that. You want to do that? No problem at all. Remember my challenge? Anything you want to do in Splunk, you can do. We've got this incredibly rich. I've been stupefied at times by, I think I'm stuck. I think I'm in a cul-de-sac. There's no possible way that I'll be able to do what I'm trying to do. And then lo and behold, I find that, some poor tortured brain somewhere has encountered exactly what I'm trying to do and has provided me with a command, in this case, an untable command, which takes that previous table and untables it back into my list with just my 00476. So the same data, just untabled. Then I want to produce this average. So I can do let's put my command back in. If I just do, well, let me run the whole thing because we're getting a little tight on time. How am I doing? 4 more minutes. That's all right. That's plenty. So so you notice here, I've got 288 entries in my list. I want to add, this is where I want to add my average day. I'm calculating, give me the average this for each 5-minute window. So by date minute, give me the average value of 476, but add it to this list of 288. So if I now run this command, I'll go from 288 to 312. I hope if my maths is correct. 288. Sorry, no, because I'm doing, I'm doing hours, aren't I? So I've got 12. Yeah, I've added 12 because I've got 12 5-minute intervals. So here are my actual statistics. My my O hour, my O1 hour, my O2 hour. And then on the end of this, I've now added, this is what the, sorry, go to the end. There we go. I've added my average. So now when I put this back into my XY series, another rich command, I've now got my average column on here. When I visualize that, I get what I was looking for. And there we go. Now, how to use that? So that's giving me my, like an average. I can then use that average here to create like an upper and lower band by not just calculating the, let's look at this search. I'm not just calculating the average, but also using the standard deviation. So now I've got a kind of like a happy corridor. This is what each hour should look like. Now, as long as my current hour is sort of within this upper and lower band, the happy corridor, as I call it, then I'm comfortable. If it isn't, then I want to know about it. So now I could say, I've used the 3rd of December to sort of create that happy corridor. Let's now take another day. So rather than the 3rd, let's compare maybe, well, one of these other days. Let's just pick one at random. Let's pick the 7th. How does the 7th compare to that day? So here I am, I'm comparing the 7th with the lookup, right? And I can see, because I'm using this, demo data, then actually, if I drill in a little bit, you might just be able to see each of my hours is fairly consistent, right? I don't have any massive outliers. I actually do. I have 7 outliers hidden away in this data, but it's such a small breach of my happy corridor that it's not immediately apparent. So over here, I've got the same data, and I've used this blue line to show where there are these little tiny breaches. So if I drill in there, there's a little tiny breach. That one, it's just, my actual number has just dropped below my, my low point. So there's a little breach, but it's tiny. In fact, here I've shown, how would you actually deploy this in the real world? Yeah, fine, you might want to look back and sort of say, were there any breaches last week? But probably more useful would be to say, let's look at the latest hour, let's look at this real data. And actually, yeah, there was, it got very close here to going below my happy corridor. Maybe another way of, but again, I'm using my demo data here, which is all a little bit predictable, a little bit consistent. You imagine if my latest hour actually looked like this, where I've got my happy corridor, and then in the last 5 minutes, look, I've got this clear breach of data. Suddenly I was expecting it to be about 481, and suddenly it's breached to 930. Now I want to know about that, So that's one way of displaying it. Maybe another way is just to say, look, the current, this latest value, 716, so maybe my dashboard would be even more targeted just by saying, big bright red box, 716, 299 above the happy corridor upper limit. So I've sort of had a fairly major breach there. Maybe I should have shown that as a percentage to make it even more kind of obvious that something is going wrong. And if you want to be really obvious that something's going wrong, then maybe you could just put out a big red banner saying, right, everybody panic. So that's the pattern. Bang on 10 o'clock as I finish. Sped through it. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of an idea that, you can write simple queries in Splunk and get a lot of impact. You can write these more sophisticated ones, and like I said, just treat Splunk like a dashboard, like a spreadsheet. If you want to, anything you want to do, I've literally challenged audiences now, anything you want to do with the data, you can do it in Splunk. If you can imagine it, you can do it. You want to do that analysis, you can do it. And hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea about, how you can use one particular pattern of the thousands that exist. One, looking at using historical data which has a clear repeat cycle, using that historic data to give us a benchmark for today, so that if something goes wrong today, we can immediately send out some sort of a notification, either just via a dashboard panel here, or more possibly as an alert mechanism to send an email or send an SMS or send a Slack or a Teams or a chat to notify the responsible team, the stakeholders, that they need to get on their A game and address some issue that has occurred. And even you can then start to use the predictive capability in Splunk to start to see where, rather than waiting for it to breach, was there some sort of indication that it was starting to trend out of character, and getting ahead of it to say, it's okay now, but if it continues on this trend, in an hour's time, we're going to have some sort of a problem. Wouldn't you like to have 60 minutes grace to get ahead of it and put in some sort of plan to prevent that disaster from, or challenge from, occurring? I'll stop there. Couple of minutes over. Any questions? I'll put this back up to the top so that you can see the search that you need to do. That will give you those 5 blogs about this challenge. So if you want to read about it in any more detail, a bit slower time frame, there's the opportunity to do so.
Great. And Tony, listen, it was super. It is very, very insightful, and especially for people like myself. I'm not a techie person. I find this super, super interesting. There's a question coming through from Ahmad, and he's asking, any literature that you would recommend for mastering SPL?
Well, that's a great question. And actually, let me. What I always do, Splunk, literally, I'll do this 100 times a day. Splunk Docs, and you saw me do time chart, right? That's a command. I'm sure you, and you'll always get this, right at the top. I don't know how we've managed to sort of magic this, but you'll always get the docs.splunk.com current search reference. You'll get the link to the time chart command in all its glory. There'd be just a start to it there, and on you go. So that's a really good place to start, is just the Splunk Docs. I think that that would be my suggestion, really.
That's great. And thank you for sharing that. I may probably also have a look myself to get familiar with with SPL language. Another question coming through: why is now a good time to grow your career at Splunk?
Well, I tell you exactly that is because there's just more and more of this what we call machine data, and what I mean by that is, as we sort of digitize everything, there is this trail of digital kind of exhaust of every transaction, every mouse click, every app on your phone. Everything is that is kind of leaving machine data, a bit like what we were looking at. When you visit a website, this is the type of data that just gets left in your wake. This is literally, each one of these entries here is kind of a click on a website. Every interaction with an app, everything so that's a little, on the one hand, that's a bit of an eye opener, right? But for those companies, there is just an awesome amount of intel in this data. If you're the person who can get to grips with it and show them that, what, all of a sudden people have stopped buying this product, or perhaps all of a sudden they're buying 10 times more of this product than normal, or last month we did 24 of these and now we're doing 2004. I can actually think back through my career, even before Splunk, and there were those people who bothered to do that sort of analysis, and they were doing it in spreadsheets and probably even before that, and I can almost name them. They were people who became known as the kind of the kind of guru, the oracle, the person who you went to if you wanted to know what's going on in my business, and then there were these sort of visionaries who began to be concerned and would maybe hook up with that person and use that intel to start to steer the business. And basically, that's what Splunk does. We're about helping those people get to grips with what's going on in their world, be it from an IT or a security or just a good old business analyst sort of perspective. What's going on in my business? And nowadays, because of Splunk, you're not looking at a spreadsheet of maybe last week's data, the last data that you were able to get your hands on, the most recent data you were able to get your hands on. So even then, they were regarded as superstars because they had that analysis, but unfortunately their analysis was, a week out of date or maybe in a month out of date, but it was still the best they had. Well, now with Splunk, you can be the person, or you're helping people be the person who has their finger on the pulse, absolute real time, finger on pulse. So, every single time, so that's why it's a great time, and every company is more and more concerned about that as digitization and as apps and become more and more prevalent. That's why I think it's a great time to be starting your career at Splunk. We're more relevant now and becoming more relevant every day.
Wow, that's super interesting. I have more of a personal question myself for you.
Okay.
Then you've been fortunate enough to work for different prestigious companies, in your career.
Wow.
From your perspective, how is Splunk perhaps different, and what do you enjoy most about working at Splunk?
Yeah, we do pride ourselves. Splunk does, right from the very first interaction with Splunk, right, the name, Splunk does pride itself on being a bit kind of quirky and a bit sort of different and a bit fun and sort of light-hearted, and that's again, here's a little personal anecdote. I remember 25 years ago being at Microsoft with a couple of mates, young bucks, and we're sort of thinking, it was brilliant. It was great fun back then, back in those days. It's Microsoft, not as it is, I'm sure now for those people, but for us, we were smashing it. Microsoft was on an absolute roll. Every month there was great parties around the place, and everybody was having a great time. Always seemed to be having a lot of fun. And then, over my career, 10 years ago, so 20 years after that heyday, 10 years ago, me and one of those guys we were sort of, things are not as much fun now. Is that because we're older and we're just not having as much fun, or is it because Microsoft was this special thing at that time, and we were just lucky to be a part of it. And we kind of asked ourselves, are other people having as much fun as we had back in that day, or were we just, sort of lucky to be out there at that time? And then I came to Splunk, and me and that same bloke had this conversation more recently saying, you know what, we were just in the wrong place. Here at Splunk, we are having that much fun, and we are that excited and motivated and sort of engaged and driven by, as we were 25 years ago as kind of young, as sort of youngsters. So, that was a really nice sort of refreshing sort of moment to realize that, I'm having as much fun now with this tech, and I feel more engaged and excited about the capability than I have done, ever throughout my career. As you probably can tell from the enthusiasm and the fact that I speak at 1,000 miles an hour about this stuff, it's an unbelievable capability, which I actually don't think, the vast majority of our existing customers are not truly aware of just how brilliant it is, because, it takes a little bit of getting used to. There's a little bit of effort to, to understand how you can write a query like that. I know it's not, that's not falling off a log, right? But if you invest a bit of time in it, it becomes, and you just maintain this sort of, it's a bit like a spreadsheet type sort of ethos. That to me was the sort of morning chorus, the wake up call. It's like, oh yeah, it's not that difficult. There's some weird looking commands that you have to sort of get to grips with and understand what they're doing, but it's just like a spreadsheet. It's just, in a spreadsheet you do it manually by cutting and pasting data. Well, here you haven't got the time to do it manually, because it's a real-time flow of data. You've got to have commands that cut and paste the data for you and tumble it and convert it. But if you're prepared to do that, then you are, then I think you've got you can then, you can be the one who literally Splunker comes. Oh, one more story. I don't know if I'm sure somebody has mentioned the fact that Splunk comes from the US term Spelunk with an E between SPELUNK, and spelunkers in the US are these crazy girls and boys who, ladies and gents who want to descend into caves, and go kind of caving with a torch on their head and dangling from a rope, and they lower themselves into the center of the earth, and they are shining their torch around, and they could be the first person who's ever seen that, and they'll see a cave or a cavern or an entrance down there, and they'll go and explore that, and they find another whole world that perhaps no one's ever seen before, which leads on to another world, which leads on to another world. And the analogy is Splunk, us, we provide the same capability in your data world, that you can lower yourself into a rope with a torch on your head, this language, and sort of explore that data chaos in a sensible, methodical way of exploring what was previously uncharted, previously untapped. And I just think that's just a fantastic ability for us to get to grips with and go out there and show our customers what they can do with their data. And you will be the person who brings the wow moment to them. I've literally done this, time and time again. I go into a customer, I show them this type of thing, and I'll start off with, one or two people there that I'm due to meet, and they'll run off and say, "You've got to come and come have a look at what this Splunk guy is doing. He's showing us this our data in a way that that we've never noticed before. We didn't know that kind of their data might not look like this. It might be like every day was kind of the same, and then suddenly last Wednesday something really bizarre happened. The data disappeared." Or it shot through the roof, or it fell through the floor, and they were blissfully unaware of it, really. And yet I'm showing them a way that with Splunk they could have been on top of that, and they could have had some sort of a notification like this, which rather than looking back on it 4 days later and going, "Oh, I wonder what happened there," instead they could have been notified, the moment that anomaly occurred. They could have had some sort of an alarm telling them that they need to worry about it and get on top of it. It's a great place to be.
Wow.
Sorry, long answer to
No. It's great, and I really admire that the passion and the enthusiasm that you have for for the business and for the platform, and first of all for the technology. I think that's amazing. Listen, I'm mindful of the time, so just want to say thank you again, Tony, for allowing us to be part of this journey, for you to kind of show us obviously the true power of the Splunk platform. And also I want to thank everyone for joining today's session. Just a reminder that tomorrow we'll have a session with Rupert Truman, who is one of the people that have started on an interim basis, and now he's one of the consulting solution engineers at Splunk as well. So tune in tomorrow at 9:30, the same time as today, and I'm sure it will be as exciting as today's session. So thank you very much once again. If you have any questions, I have shared on the chat. Please feel free to send us an email on hackathon@splunk.com, and Tony will come back to you with an answer as soon as possible.
Good luck, everybody, for the rest of the hackathon. And thank you very much indeed for spending the time with me this morning.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.